Howdy. This is Mission Texas.
A political podcast about winning Texas by 2032, or else we may lose the White House for a generation.
I'm one of your hosts, Alex Clark.
And I am Kate Rumsey.
Other podcasts may focus on the day-to-day or the next election, but we are keeping the eyes of Texas on the bigger prize. What happens after the next census?
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Mission Texas. We're so excited to have our next guest with us, Marcos Velez, a Democratic candidate for Texas Lieutenant Governor, trying to do something pretty unusual in Texas politics, run statewide campaign, not as a politician. He's coming out of the oil and gas industry and the United Steelworkers Union, where he's built his campaign around a core argument. The Texas government isn't working for people who work for a living. He's positioning himself in the race as someone who understands the day-to-day economic pressures that Texans actually face. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad we get to do a proper episode because we got you on like an Instagram live before the race, but welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me.
It's my first time to get to talk to you, so I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah. So I kind of alluded to your origin story, and we talked about it a little bit just down the road from where I live at an event at the People's Last Stand. But tell us, what is your origin story? Like, how did you come into the labor movement? How did you decide you wanted to run for lieutenant governor? Kind of take us through the beginning steps.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Everything in life is a bit unexpected. As a kid, my mom cleaned hotel rooms. She made $4.25 an hour. And anybody that's met me on the campaign trail has probably heard that. But when you talk about origin stories, my mother got a union job, and that changed our lives. It uplifted us into the middle class. And all of a sudden, that it was like a light switch had been flipped. And so I always understood that unions did really good things for working class people. But then when I found myself looking for a career, always had a passion for anything mechanical. I wanted to seek out a career in industrial repair. And so I went to work in the same oil industry that my mother was working in. And I found myself in a union job. And it was in that job that I thought, hey, this is the best job I've ever had. I've made it. You kind of get complacent. And then very quickly, I realized that advocacy never stops. The same people that fought to create spaces for people like my mother to uplift them into the middle class are the same people that actually started off fighting for safer workplaces and better treatment for the middle class. And it was after a particularly, I guess, jarring workplace fatality, mass casualty event that I started realizing that I needed to participate in that advocacy. And so as the years went on, I got more and more involved. I became a labor activist, you know, really fighting for like safer working conditions for me and my coworkers, making sure that the company treated everybody with dignity, that they didn't discriminate against my coworkers. And then that grew into a platform where all of a sudden I was, you know, leading my group in the local union hall. And then I went to go work for the district, work for the International Union. And now I work as the assistant director for the United Steelworkers District 13. You know, we cover all of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Aruba, and we bargain for better, better wages, safer working conditions. We have some of the only job sites in the state of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, where women make dollar for dollar what men make. We have some of the only job sites where we have very expansive summary plan description healthcare plans that cover not just you, but your domestic partner and your adopted children. And those are things that I think all Texans need. But it's something that as I was talking to my children about the economic opportunities available to them, I have two daughters that are graduating high school this year. And one of them, she concerned me because all of her school choices were outside of the United States. She was emailing with schools in Japan. She was emailing with a school in Canada. Then we took her up to Canada to visit the school. And I said, obviously love you a lot, support your decisions, but why so far? And I'm telling you, it was like an earth-shattering moment. She said, Dad, she goes, if you were a 17-year-old woman living in the state of Texas, would you build your life here? And it really made me question my privilege. It made me question, hey, I mean, once your kids move and they meet people and they start lives, you know they're not coming back. And so that was really something for me that I was like, hey, we have to do something different. But even more so, I've been really bitter when I look at the state of politics in Texas, like so angry. You look at what we do. We go out, we knock on doors. We those of us that are politically active, like we fight really hard for candidates and they always forget about us. They leave us behind. when you look at the state of manufacturing in this country, we have eliminated manufacturing jobs through poor trade deals and bad political decisions to the point that we're forcing everyone into the service industry. But now we are eroding service industry jobs with the advent of AI and the rise of technology. Where are normal people supposed to work to support themselves?
Yeah. Amen.
Kate and I both have young daughters, and
Yep.
it cuts to the bone because I think we both have a sense of like we have to fix Texas so that we don't.
Yes. That's why I'm doing this. Yeah.
We got to have these girls grow up in a better Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm curious, what made you want to jump into the lieutenant governor race? Like, what were you seeing? I'm guessing it's a mutual loathing for Dan Patrick and what he does for the state. So tell us about that.
When you look at what's going on in Texas government, it's really frustrating. You go to these local union halls or you go out in your community, you're talking to parents, and you have parents that are moving out of state because they're worried about their kids. You have people that can't afford the basic cost of housing. You have young people that can't find family sustaining jobs. And then we have a lieutenant governor that's more concerned with what hangs on the walls of classrooms than whether or not we can fund classes. We have a lieutenant governor that's more worried about who our neighbor chooses to love than whether or not our neighbor can be housed or whether they can afford health care. And it's super frustrating as a normal everyday person because what I believe should be prioritized in the Texas Senate is bills that advance the interest of working class people, that make housing more affordable, that raise wages, that improve life for everyday Texans. And instead, we're focusing on things that only benefit the uber wealthy or divide the masses to the point that they don't realize that collectively we can change the system.
No, I think that's great. And I think you kind of at least hinted at it. You know, the lieutenant governor is a very powerful position in Texas government. We talked about this a little bit, is that they are the president of the Senate. They set the agenda. They decide what gets voted on and what doesn't. I mean, there are currently bills languishing that have majority support that'll never come up for a vote because Dan Patrick personally doesn't like it. I think about like casino style gambling or any kind of marijuana legalization at all. If you are suddenly given the gavel and you control the Senate agenda, what are like the first 2 or 3 bills you're going to prioritize?
The very, very first one is raising the state minimum wage. And I've had a couple people reach out and say, hey, that does nothing for me. I don't make minimum wage. But I think people lose sight of the fact that, especially as someone that bargains wages for a living, anytime you lower wages at the bottom, there's a certain gap that has to be maintained between what you earn and what the guy at McDonald's makes, between what you earn and what the guy that's. And so it's really one of those things where there is always going to be an adjustment for all working people. And then you get an argument that says, hey, but then the cost of everything will go up. Wages do not account for 100% of the cost of a product. So even though cost may go up 1 to 2%, it's not going to be the same as what your wage increase was. You're still going to come out ahead. And so raising the state minimum wage is a big thing for me. I believe that all people that work a full-time job should make a living wage, and they should be able to afford to pay their bills and afford housing. And so that's the number one priority for me, because I believe that that's something that immediately improves conditions for all working people. And then when you get beyond raising the state minimum wage, we have to look at improving the amount of funding we have for things like our public education. Teachers should not have to work 2 and 3 jobs to pay their bills. We just took $1 billion out of public education and shifted it into a voucher scheme. And so we have to make sure that we work really, really hard to ensure that our public schools can thrive. I'm a product of public education. I had some of the best teachers that you could think of. And honestly, if you look, I graduated from high school actually a year early. I graduated in 2003. I think of the caliber of education that we had back in the early 2000s. And then you look at like what my kids are receiving now, and I'm not knocking the teachers, I'm knocking the system. There's been a reduction in the what we're putting into our schools. A lot of people talk about the total dollar amount, but they don't look at the dollars per student. We have to increase the dollars per student that we spend, and we have to make sure that we're paying teachers for the profession that they do and not treating it like a vocation that, is like a part-time job.
Yeah. Well, I think when I was campaigning, I read a stat that we're like $4,000 per pupil below the average in this state. And that's insane. Like how much money you could have for each student. And now we have reports about what the voucher system has actually gone towards, which is towards a lot of private school kids who are already in the system. So it's definitely, I'm glad to hear that that is a priority for you, but just even talking about teachers, I recall I don't know if you were growing up in Texas, but I'm curious, is your mom like a LBJ Democrat? Like, because I think a lot of working people back in the 50s and 60s considered themselves LBJ Democrats, including my grandparents who grew up or were working as school teachers, public school teacher and librarian, and they always considered themselves an LBJ Democrat. But then I think you've said in other interviews that, the working class has turned more to Republican and Trump agenda. So how do you reflect on that? I mean, tell us about your mom and also how we can get working class people back.
Yeah, so it's funny. You're right. My mom did fall into that LBJ Democrat category. I think the shift from LBJ Democrats to Reagan Democrats really occurred as we saw manufacturing, start to curtail in this country. I always tell people, everyone talks about a just transition, but no one accepts the fact that one has never existed. When you talk about the decline of the auto industry in Detroit, where did those people transition to, right? They transitioned out of good family sustaining jobs into jobs that didn't pay what they were making in their previous jobs. And so people were suffering. When you talk to the guys in the union halls now, they're angry and they're upset and they feel like opportunity is being stolen from them. And I always have to remind them, an immigrant did not take your job. Bad trade deal took your job. And the reason there's less opportunity for your son than there was for you is because of the politicians that we've elected. When you go to the gas pump and you're buying fuel and you're angry about the cost, you're paying for the political decisions made by our elected leaders. But we've had Republicans running this state for so long that a lot of guys forget they can only blame the Democrats for so much. The Democrats haven't really had a meaningful amount of input in the decision in this state for pretty much as long as those of us on this Zoom call have been adults, and so it's really one of those things where I think the shift that's come is the guys hear the Democrats say that they support the working class worker. They're here for the blue collar guy, but their pockets don't reflect that. Their job opportunities don't reflect that. And so, look, I'm not going to put all the blame on Republicans because Democrats carry a lot of the blame too. They have shifted away from being the party of the working class to the party of the elite. And I've seen that more and more as I've run for office. It's an insider's club. It's a club of the uber wealthy. Because we don't have campaign finance reform, it really creates a system where you have the super rich Democrats that are running and they want to hold on to power. And then you have the super rich Republicans that want to hold on to power. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference between some of the people that sit in the middle of those parties.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Amen.
unfortunately, the Texas legislature makes that problem, I think, exponentially worse than even other parts of the country because it's a part-time legislature and they pay you part-time. They pay you like $7,200 a year, not a month, a year.
Yeah.
And so they really kind of make it where only those who are independently wealthy or are professionals in a place that is going to benefit from that access and will pay you anyways, like lawyers often, unfortunately. We see a lot of lawyers. Kate and I are lawyers. That doesn't mean we're all bad. But
everyone likes their lawyer.
That's right. That's right. I guess what I want to know is how do you see yourself as jumping in and offering something different? What is your elevator pitch?
Look, the lieutenant governor's role is all about prioritization and negotiation. And as someone that negotiates with multinational corporations that have a higher annual revenue than the state's biannual budget, I do this every single day for working class people, and I want to do that for the working people of Texas. The reason that government is so messed up is because we have elected leaders that don't feel the pain of their decisions. They're never impacted by the legislation that they pass. As someone that lives in the community and understands the plight of working people and has fought and won, I want to take our normal people perspective to the Texas Senate, and I want to use that perspective to push legislation that'll benefit us.
I wanted to go back to something about being a working class person, feeling the pain of the legislation, because something I reflect on from my race is that there seems to be an expectation versus reality gap in campaigning and also being a candidate. It seems like everyone wants a candidate all over the state all the time. And that really benefits a person who is independently wealthy and retired or doesn't have school-age children like you and I and Alex. And it was really hard for me. I was working like 50, 60-hour weeks, had a 1-year-old, and also trying to campaign at the same time. I wasn't even doing a statewide race. It was a local state house matter. But like, how do you see that as an outsider coming in now? And then how do we bridge that gap? Because I would love to tell like people, because they're always like, well, I haven't seen this person and they're not at our events and they need to come to our club. And it's like, well, I can't be everywhere at once. And I've got this whole thing. And, so how do you perceive that? And how do we hopefully bridge the gap for working class people to run?
I think it's funny because you hear that from like the Democratic clubs, but voters not necessarily. And so it's really one of those things where you just have to kind of drown out the noise that comes from the Democratic clubs. Here's the reality. Democratic clubs are accustomed to seeing career politicians because that's their job. But once you explain to them that you're working a normal job, I tell them I start my average day about 3:30, 4 o'clock if I'm running late. I work a full-time job like every normal person. But then you're campaigning until 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so when you explain that to them, they're really understanding. There's a couple of them that'll throw in your face, well, we've seen your opponent 4 times. And it's like, hey, that may be the case. But let me tell you something. Ask the working people of Texas that just got a pay increase, or ask the working people of Texas that, all of a sudden their working conditions got better because I sat at a table with them for 14 hours. And when they understand that you're doing the work that benefits people like them, they're more understanding. But there is an expectation because they're so accustomed to seeing these career politicians float around to events all day. And that really concerns me. If you have all day to spend at events, what are you doing for me as a voter?
Right. No, that's a really good point. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And because I reflect on, because I could say to them, I'm a working mom. I know what the cost of formula is right now. I know what Medicaid and TRICARE, being a TRICARE member means as a government employee. And so I think that's really good to help put that into perspective for folks. And I think that's especially true in this race. I'm wondering your thoughts, because I know Vicky, who was on our podcast, and we appreciate her time, but my understanding was that she had been making the circuit, because that's the expectation. You got to go to all these clubs, and she's going around. And I know that's a good thing. Like, we want our people to show up, right, in our communities to the extent they can. But, you jumped in, and I don't know if you had heard that, like she had kind of been around. Like, how do you come into this race knowing that she was a state rep and had been kind of circulating? Because that's a pitch somebody told us after November 2024, like, who's going to run in the next statewide, who's going to be running, who are the next candidates. And Vicki Goodwin was immediately at the top of somebody's list.
Yeah, so no, look, I think it's good in democracy for people from different backgrounds to run. I think it's really good for Texas voters to get to decide, do they want a very Austin ticket, or do they want a little bit of diversity? Do they want people with different backgrounds? I think people tend to mix up the House and the Senate. Hey, look, experience working on writing bills and, moving legislation through the House is great. But I do believe that when you look at the lieutenant governor's role, it's more of a bargaining role. It's more of a role of prioritization. And I think when you look at relevant experience, what I do in the labor movement, I think it's a good fit. I think people also have to understand that I respect all union leaders, all labor leaders, but they lump everybody together. There's labor leaders that are responsible for different size groups. And when you look at like what I'm responsible for, it's a larger contingent than any of these districts you see in the state of Texas. And so, hey, look, I appreciate the fact that you have candidates that have been around the political circuit, but all that time that they've been in the political circuit, I've actually been in normal working class America, watching people have their limbs amputated, watching people be horrifically burned to a crisp, watching people struggle and go from living paycheck to paycheck to living overdraft to overdraft. And so, hey, the experience is great. But the other piece is I'm also one of the people that understand that, hey, where has that experience gotten us? And when I look at the state of Texas, I think we need something different.
Yeah.
No, you mentioned the Austin ticket, and that's a really interesting point that I don't think is being talked about a lot. James Talarico, Gina Hinojosa, obviously both Austin-based Democrats. Vicki Goodwin is also an Austin-based Democrat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You're based in Houston?
I am based in Houston.
We have talked about Houston on this podcast. Fun fact, 1 in 6 Texans live in Houston.
Yes.
I'm one of those 6.
Hugely important city. Putting that out there to reflect on. Something I wanted to circle back to, because I did the math on this. You were talking about for our adult lives, 1994, the last time a Democrat won statewide, I was starting kindergarten. And I think maybe one other distinguishing factor, maybe for you amongst the ticket and in general, I think throughout the country, as we're seeing a lot of younger candidates.
Mm-hmm.
You're a young guy.
1994, I think I was 9.
Yeah, let's say no one would guess looking at the two of us that I was the younger one, but you have a youthful exuberance about you, and you in fact are a young man.
I know. I think I'm the oldest on this podcast episode. That year I was in middle school, so I was going into my public school, middle school those years. So we can all reflect on the '90s, the glory days, '80s and '90s people. But yeah, I mean, you're younger, and I think that that's great. We're seeing a lot of young folks. Back to my point of trying to support younger candidates who might have other lives, kids, as you're mentioning. And speaking of a young person running, Taylor Remitt, he won in the Senate District 9 race in Tarrant County. And I don't know if you've heard this news, but the person you're trying to replace, Dan Patrick, he just left him out of committee assignments. And so I'm wondering how do you react to that? I mean, that's the kind of guy we have right now who won't even give, he's sworn in and he doesn't even have a committee assignment in the Senate.
The sad part about that, no Taylor, he's a great guy, phenomenal talent. We would rather play partisan games than allow someone that was overwhelmingly elected by their peers, that represents a group of Texans that really feel like they've been left out of the decision-making process, that brings the support of working class America and, middle class America to the table. We're going to leave them out because we want to play partisan games. And I mean, it's that level of childishness that we've felt the pain from in Texas. The perspective that Taylor brings to the table is a perspective that would benefit all working class people. But because Dan Patrick is more concerned with partisanship, he's not allowing him to participate, and it's disappointing.
And that's so frustrating. Another frustrating thing. Never going to let it go, Kate.
Oh, no.
I thought he would have been disabused of this dumb idea by now.
This is a reoccurring thing on our podcast.
His Instagram still has it. The man has forgotten he has an Instagram account, I'm convinced, because the first word is the word Democrat. He didn't have the courage to run in the primary. He's going to do this independent bid and try to, I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know. What do you have to say about this guy, Mike Collier?
Honestly, hey, look, it's his right to run.
Sure.
I don't have any sense of entitlement where I believe that the field should be easy. If I was concerned about his run, I'd be in bad shape against Dan Patrick. So while I understand your perspective and it's like, hey, it splits up some vote, the reality for me is, hey, look, we're going to run our own campaign. Hey, I encourage him to run. It's his right. And I think it's healthy, like a steel sharpens steel. And so, hey, look, if it gets to the point where it's an issue, but I honestly, it's not to be arrogant. But I believe that people are looking for progressive Democrats. They're not looking for people that want to straddle the fence and call themselves like independent Democrats or moderate Democrats. Hey, being moderate has never gotten us anywhere. We have to be firm and unapologetic in our progressive beliefs. And us trying to play to the middle gets us nowhere.
Yeah. So, speaking of, how do you perceive November? How are you going to get there to get across the finish line? I'm assuming with a slate. So, tell us, because Dan Patrick has got a war chest, just like Greg Abbott. They got a lot of money. Something that was surprising to me when I ran was that in Texas, we don't really have campaign spending limits, whereas the federal candidates do. So a billionaire could write $1 million check, which they do often in these races for them. What's the theory of the case for you to win and hopefully with an entire ticket, push it over the line?
Yeah, so look, no illusions of any slate. Everybody's running their own race. And so right now I can only speak for myself. But as far as the Velez campaign, very proud of the fact that we've been very fiscally responsible, operating. We're normal working people. So when a normal person hears $10,000, $100,000, $500,000, that is a ton of money to a normal working person. And so we've been really good with our money. We're not spending frivolously. We're not spending tens of thousands of dollars on consultants or ridiculous stuff like that. And so, hey, look, we are using our money to travel the state, to talk to normal everyday people, to go to community events, to participate in the rural and the urban communities all over the state. And so we're going to continue to run the same campaign. If money is something that scares you in one of these races, you are never going to be able to beat the incumbent Republican because you'll never be able to outspend them. But I've told everybody this, the day of the Democratic conventions, I hit 6 conventions. I started at 4 a.m. I was at my first convention by 7, hit 5 conventions, and then drove 3 hours to catch Bexar County. And so that's really one of those things. I'll be outspent, but I won't be outworked. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to use to get us across the finish line. We're going to get around. We're going to talk to people where they're at. We're not going to waste a whole lot of time playing partisan games. We're just going to run our own campaign.
I like how you're framing it. Like, on the one hand, you're saying we need a progressive Democrat who's not afraid to stand up for values, but we're also going to set partisan games aside. And I think those two things can be true at the same time. But I want to kind of hear you kind of articulate the way you think about it. And I think Taylor Remitt's a good example of it, because he always talks about he wasn't running against Republicans. And it doesn't sound like, from a lot of times I've heard you talk, you're not primarily running against Dan Patrick so much as you're running for raising the minimum wage and making housing affordable and public education, right? If I had to pick three things, those are the things I've heard you say over and over again. So you have campaign discipline, right? I haven't heard all that much about Dan Patrick, honestly. And that's a strategy I think a lot of voters appreciate.
Well, and more than a strategy, it's more of who I am. So people are always quick to whine and complain about their opponent or this or that or how unfair. Hey, look, we live in a world that is incredibly unfair to normal working class people. I am running against policies. I'm running against the system. And that system includes Democrats and Republicans. And so I'm not going to sit here and spend my whole day talking about my opponents, because as a working class person, if I'm going to the grocery store and a cart of groceries costs me $400 and it used to cost $200, I don't care about any of those people. I care about what it costs me to get out of that store. And that's why I think policies are more important than the specific people. If you're going to sit there and whine and complain about people, you've obviously lost sight of the issues. And to me, the issues are what are driving me to run, and they're what I'm going to continue to campaign on across this state. Now, the man is horrible. But more important than how horrible he is what we can do for working people.
So can we dig in just a little bit on the leadership differences, like how you would approach the job, right? Because you want policies to get done. You're not like beating the drum for like Democrats are awesome all the time. Every Democrat is great. You're like, no, we're going to focus on getting things done, which I think people appreciate. So how is your approach to the job going to look different than his? Like, he very much, obviously with Senator Remitt, is not even putting him on committees. He is very iron fist. He won't allow certain bills to the floor. How are you going to approach that job so that you can reach Republican senators, but also Republican voters who you might need to be a part of the coalition?
Here's the funny thing about reaching Republican senators. A lot of the Democratic policies are popular across the aisle. It's the fact that these senators are scared of Dan Patrick, and so they won't move on them, right? These bills, they die in committee. One of the biggest things I plan to bring to the Texas Senate is the same leadership style that I use in organized labor. A very grassroots, people-focused, very accessible. Look, we have to stop operating in darkness behind closed doors. We need to bring the press back onto the Senate floor. We need to hold these politicians accountable. It's a lot easier to communicate with voters and say, hey, look, we're having some issues with this senator. He's the holdup. Call him, ask him what's going on. And that way the narrative is all coming from a very unbiased place instead of stuff occurring behind closed doors. The other thing is, I don't plan to run the Texas Senate based on my personal religious beliefs, based on it. Look, we're going to run it on things that benefit working class people. And so what is going to benefit the majority? We're not focused on special interest, not funded by special interest. And so I think that's going to be the biggest difference. I'm not going to take multi-million-dollar bribes, to protect my buddies. And I think that's the biggest difference is like, look, I'm not looking to become a career politician. I've been very clear with people from the start. I love what I do in organized labor. One of the things driving me to run also is the fact that organized labor in the state of Texas in the public sector has very few rights. And so we have to do something to help teachers, county employees, firefighters, police officers. There's so much that we could do for our public sector workers in the state of Texas instead of pushing everything to privatization. And so those are going to be my focuses. That's going to be my leadership style, a collaborative leadership style. Now, I'm not going to capitulate. I'm not playing into these culture wars. I'm not going to lean into, because at the end of the day, culture wars don't put food on people's tables. Culture wars don't pay people's astronomically high bills. And culture wars do not warm your house when the grid goes down. We're not doing any of that. But what we are going to do is we're going to respect all people. We're going to take care of the people of Texas, and we're going to ensure that opportunity exists for all Texans.
Speaking of, I'm curious of your experience with negotiating with big companies, as you mentioned earlier, because I think a big myth that we have here in Texas is that Democrats are bad for business and that we've got this booming economy because of the less regulations. And a common phrase we hear a lot, or at least I do at the doors whenever I'm knocking on during the general election, is like, don't California my Texas. And look at all these companies who are coming to Texas because they're trying to move away from regulations. And part of, I'm wondering your response to that as somebody I think there's a lot of fear. And as you're mentioning, the Republicans wield a lot of fear in politicking. And the fear is that if you elect a Democrat, we're going to have a bad economy, or we're not going to be good for companies who employ people. So I'm curious your thoughts on how we respond to that and also bust that myth. And I think of us as myth busters over here on this podcast. I really want to bust some myths.
Hey, so look, I think we have to start off by taking responsibility for our part in the myth, right? Republicans do a way better job at messaging than Democrats. I believe we've allowed them to hijack our message with working class people, and we've done very little to combat it. But also, you have to accept that some of that myth comes from some issues that they see in states like California. No one wants Texas to become California, but I think all Texans want an environment where corporations respect working people, and regulations aren't going to hurt working class people or jobs. You have just as many jobs in those states like California as you do in Texas. When those corporations move to Texas, you have to ask yourself why they're moving here. They're moving here to exploit our weak labor standards and our relatively weak regulatory environment. And that leads to issues like this groundwater issue that we have right now. We are on the brink of running out of water in several major Texas cities. But we're not stopping any of these corporations from coming in and sucking our groundwater dry, from extracting our water and selling it out of state. And so it's really one of those things where I think when you talk to people about the issues and the real impacts on a level that they can understand, and you say, hey, look, if I ask you, if a road's being built, do you believe that that road should be built by Texans? Yes. Do you believe that they should be paid a fair wage? Yes. And do you believe that those people should be allowed reasonable sick days? And they're going to say yes. And so then you support project labor agreements. Yes. But if you just go in and you talk to someone that doesn't understand what a project labor agreement is, they're going to say, well, I've heard those things are bad and they give unions too much power. And so it's really about like, look, we have a responsibility and an onus to explain to people what the policies that we support mean and what the effects are going to be. And we also have to make sure that we don't support things that are going to put people out of jobs without having a suitable replacement. I can tell you that a lot of people are scared of green energy because they don't understand that we have wind and solar that's sitting there waiting to be connected because of our current leaders. And so if you explain to them that, hey, there are good paying jobs that people are not being allowed to work because of the regulatory environment in this state, that would upset them. But when you tell them, hey, we need to get rid of fossil fuels, they're going to be like, no way, I'm not getting rid of fossil fuels. And so the narrative is important.
Yeah, how do we get through to them? I mean, it just boggles the mind. I hear these myths all the time, like, oh, like what you're saying, or that I don't like government. And you ask them, well, why don't you like government? Well, there's a long line at the DMV. Well, that's a state agency that is run by Republicans. So is that really a Democrat issue? But I'm glad to hear you say that because it just seems like we have to get through to people and understand where they're at. And I hear you because I think that when people think of AOC and the Green New Deal, it like conjures up Republicans were really good at weaponizing that fear monologue about that. And if you show them, hey, we were able to weather a lot of the hottest days of the year because we had wind and solar, and we have a lot of natural resources here. And I'm not talking oil and gas. We have sun, we have wind, we have coasts. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
The other thing is Democrats have to take responsibility for they're always talking about stuff that they don't understand. They don't understand the oil industry. They don't understand energy. They don't understand guns. They don't. And so they use the wrong terminology and it comes off as very inauthentic. And so, hey, when you talk about some of these progressive ideas, they're really quick to like spout stats, but they rarely have a background where they can say, because I can tell you, I've been in a paper mill, I've been in an oil refinery, I've been in a coal burning power plant, I've been in a nuclear power plant. And so those are things that like, if you want to talk about those facilities, we can talk about the pros, the cons, the environmental effects. I can tell you how the Republicans stripping all teeth out of regulatory environments like the TCEQ are hurting working class people. But your average Democratic politician wouldn't know what those things were if they bit them on the face.
TCEQ, I had to deal with that when I was in the federal government because I don't think people realize the EPA is so decentralized, and they really have a lot of regulations that they then push on to the state.
No, I was just going to say, I think within the Democratic Party activist base, the kind of people who are deeply involved and wear the D proudly on their back, loud and proud Democrats, I think is very uncomfortable to talk about the oil and gas industry because it's kind of nationally it's a boogeyman. They're the bad guys, but the oil and gas industry is hugely important to the state of Texas, and a lot of people work in it. These are their livelihoods that we're talking about. And I just wanted to share, because you were talking about how you've been to an oil refinery. I wanted to show my little badge that Exxon when I did the site. Yeah,
he's showing an ExxonMobil, really old ID of Alex. Maybe I'll take a picture. I don't know. You look pretty young. I'll take a picture.
You still look exactly the same, Alex.
Is this because I shaved? This is from 2024.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank
the same
you.
Person. I just look a lot younger when I shave.
We'll have to get you a USW sticker for your hard hat. That's a union site.
Right.
There you go.
I have a hard hat. It has the Haynes Boone logo on the front of it.
There you go.
There you
Alex
go.
likes to have show and tell on this podcast. He always has something to show
it's not
everybody.
as cool as whenever you and Rep Place were in the same yearbook. That was pretty cool.
Oh, yes. I loved that one. Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah. Everybody knows it's a small world.
The same elementary school.
Yeah, we went to elementary school, middle school, and high school together. So,
okay, so we talked about some distinguishing factors. You're from Houston. You're union, not a politician. You're a young candidate as a distinguishing factor. And now I do want to broach what may be a sensitive topic, but I know it's one you've talked about recently. I saw you speaking with the political influencer Howdy Politics about this. Our ticket would not have a Black candidate should you lose this runoff. Do you want to talk about how you see that as being one of the important considerations as primary voters head back out to the runoff election?
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting. And the topic really surfaced after the Senate race wrapped. Not taking a stance on the Senate race, just looking at the ticket overall, because there were several Black candidates up and down the ballot. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the ticket, I think it's funny that the Democratic Party bills themselves as this big tent party. But when it comes to African American or candidates of color, there's always this very dog whistle racist narrative of they're not qualified. They don't have the requisite experience. It always seems like those candidates are always immediately. Yeah, they're not electable. They impeach these candidates before they ever get a chance. And then I know it impacts the way a lot of people vote because they're like, no one wants to be on the losing side. But here's the reality. We've had roughly, and if I get the number wrong, people are going to burn me down, but we've had roughly 48 governors, roughly 42 lieutenant governors, over 1,000 Texas state senators. And when you go through those numbers, you know how many Black governors we've had? 0. You know how many Black lieutenant governors we've had? 0. And out of over 1,000 Texas state senators, we've had under 20 Black Texas state senators. But African American women consistently show up and do the heavy lifting for Texas, which is a majority state. Latinos do a huge amount of the lifting in this state. And the Democratic Party wonders why they're losing votes from people of color. There's no representation, and people are sick and tired of this. Like, we say that we don't have dynasties or there's no kings in America, but the reality is the Texas political system is very much a family affair. It's family business. And if you're not part of that circle, it's really hard to break into. And if you're a person of color, it's pretty much impossible. And so I think when we go and we ask black people to show up and vote for a ticket of candidates that don't represent them and really don't understand their struggle, what are they voting for? They're showing up, they're doing the lifting, and they're getting nothing in return. It's very reminiscent of the days of slavery, doing all the work for free. And so, I mean, I think that's what bothers me about the Democratic Party as a whole. I'm not saying that we should select our candidates based off of race, but if we're going to be the big tent party and it's going to be everybody's party, there should be representation for everybody. And we have to stop telling people, well, just suck it up. This is the most important election of your life. No, it's the most important election of your life because you're running. It's not the most important election of their life. And that's why no to November is a very real possibility right now for a lot of people.
I think that was the biggest takeaway that I heard, and I'm trying to listen and be conscientious about that after the primary, a lot of Black and people of color in Texas felt like they're being taken for granted, that they're not being heard, they're not being supported, and that they're not a monolith, especially the Latino community. And we have the largest population of Black people in our country, right? So especially in the Houston.
The largest.
The largest, and especially in the Houston area. So if you're going to be running in November and you're going to have a slate, I know you're saying you're not on a slate, but you're going to have a lot of people on your ticket that are not people of color. And what advice would you give to them to show like that they're showing up for those communities, to listen, to hear them, to address their concerns, and also to say that that you are heard, I guess, is the biggest takeaway, and that they're not being taken for granted?
I think the biggest thing is actually showing up where people are at and not expecting people to come to you. I think when you're speaking in a room full of people, look at the room and look and see what like demographics are making up your crowds. And I know if I go and I talk to a room full of union members and I know that the plant is 20% female, but women are not represented in the room, I have a conversation when I leave with the leadership and I ask them, hey, why do we have no representation from our union sisters in this room? And if there's some kind of impediment to that participation, then we need to move the meeting to a different time, or you have to work to create those spaces of inclusion. It's not people's job to show up and find you. It's your job to go where they're at and make sure you're connecting with them. The other thing is, one of the most frustrating things I've learned on the campaign trail is that politicians pay a whole lot of attention to polls. And I've never been polled. I've never been at an event with working people where they've been polled. And here's what I'll tell you. I don't believe polls at all. And I think if you say, hey, we're polling okay with this demographic, you're missing the point. It's not about polls. It's about sincerely seeking those people out and understanding their issues and going into their communities and actually helping them understand how you're going to improve their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, as a campaigner, you got to fish where the fish are. I love that. You got to be the one going out. It's almost like the analogy would be like a church who just expects people to come in the doors as opposed to going out and trying to be fishers of men. If you've heard that expression before.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right.
Well, speaking of, I was at the Dallas County Convention. Were you there, Marcos? I know you said you made the rounds, but at the Dallas County Convention, it was at a church, a Black church in South Dallas, I believe, Ibach, and they have an aquarium. And they make that analogy that we have to be the fisher of men. And it's incredible. And it's very kid friendly. I mean, they have like scuba divers who are there greeting us, like cleaning the tank. So it's a huge, massive thing.
Cool.
It was really cool.
Let's talk about good news. So something we like to do on the podcast, Marcos, is we like to get the muscle of sharing something positive. Because I think as Texas Democrats, we can get so focused on the negative. Republicans are so good at sharing their gospel, their good news. We need to get better at it. So what is something from your life, either personally or professionally, that is just good and you want to share it?
Hey, look, it's not relevant to a whole lot of people, but my daughter's coming home from her senior retreat today. Super excited, missed her a lot. And so that's probably the most positive thing I can think of for this particular day. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I have a almost 4-year-old. So thinking about her and going to college, I don't know. I'm going to start crying already. She like wanders into our bedroom every night. Like she just wants to like cuddle and is scared. So just can't imagine the days when she's not going to be doing that. But I guess some good news I'll share. It's springtime. Easter's around the corner. It's going to be Holy Week. And I'm just really excited. Blue bonnets are everywhere. It's my mom's favorite thing. And I just think that it's such a great thing for us as Texans to remind ourselves and also gear up for Holy Week. My family, we're Catholic, and we do a big Easter egg hunt at my uncle's place out in Forney, which is southeast Dallas area. And he's got a lot of land, so there's a lot of like eggs to be hunted, and it's going to be really exciting. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's awesome.
I was going to make mine kind of policy related because Dallas ISD just voted to offer free pre-K starting next school year.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, incredible. But now I want to talk about Easter because, yeah, it's coming up. I actually just yesterday, I got my brother on the phone. He lives in the Houston area now, too. He used to be closer to home. And so I'm glad he's coming up for Easter. Get to see him and his kids. He's got two little boys, Wolf, who was born on Halloween, and Aluka.
Whoa.
He was named before the trade. And then my mom will be joining us for modern worship at my church, First United Methodist Dallas. And then we're going to go up to Denton to my wife's extended side of the family and do a Easter egg hunt and a big smorgasbord with everybody's different foods. So I'm very excited about that.
For Easter, we usually boil crawfish.
Oh, nice. Crawfish.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Do you have any other Easter or spring plans, Mark? We mentioned before we started recording that as a candidate, you don't have a life. So it's like every Sunday you got to you're still knocking doors if you can. So what do you got going on outside of that, if you have anything?
I'd have to ask my campaign manager before I fully committed to knowing what I'm going to do, but I'd like to boil crawfish,
Yeah. Can I take a break? Yeah. Your campaign overlord. All right. Well, that's our good news. And before we go into our last segment, I want to put a plug in for our Patreon. If you would like to support us as independent media and help us defray the cost of our podcast, you can become a member of our Patreon for a few dollars a month, or you can support us by giving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast and share us on social media. You can also join our Substack, which we will have a written summary of what's going on this podcast episode. But now, okay, Marcus, for our last segment, it's called The Last Word. It's kind of like the last stand at the Alamo, the last thing you're going to leave us with. We haven't really talked about this, so I think this will be really curious as an outsider looking in now and then from the inside. What do you think it's going to take? What do we need to improve on to really flip the state? How are you perceiving the party and what we need to be doing to get us across the finish line and really do this thing?
I think as a party, this isn't about any specific person, but in general, I think Democrats have to do a better job at finding candidates that normal people can relate to. When you look at the ticket as a normal person and I see politician A, B, and C, they're all politicians to me. But if I saw a teacher, if I saw a doctor, if I saw someone from my community that I could relate to, it'd be a lot easier for me to get excited and turn out to vote. I think that the Democratic Party spends a lot of time focusing on turning out high propensity voters that already vote anyways. You know you're getting those votes. You're not going to win an election based on anger or people, those things help. They expand the electorate slightly. But really, I think you have to focus on those low propensity voters that it takes something special to get them off that couch. And I think that something special is candidates that can relate to their lived experiences.
Yeah, I mean, in that, it seemed like there was a different theory of the case between James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett about that. Do you turn out the Democratic voters who are just not voting, or do we try to reach across to the independents? And I think you mentioned earlier about the rural areas too. I mean, so how do you perceive that? Is there a strategy involved in who you're targeting or who they say your universe is of folks that you're trying to communicate to?
I'll be honest with you. I look at this campaign very much like a union organizing drive. You have let's say a 1 through 5 system where 1 are people that are definitely going to vote for you and 5 are people that are never, ever, ever going to vote for you. Anyone from a 1 to a 4, that's our initial focus. And then as we get into that final stretch, we're going to focus on the 5s. And so when you look at hardcore MAGA Republicans that get all their news from Fox, those probably aren't people that we're going to spend a whole lot of time on. But we've done really, really well with your normal everyday Republicans that are look, I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe in hard work, and I believe in the concept of family, and I'm upset. Let's talk about why you're upset, and let's talk about what contributed to this system that's crushing you. And those are the people that we're working to bring into the fold. When you look at disaffected Latinos and people in the RGV, look at the map from the primary, and I think it'll kind of give you an idea of what voters we went after in the first part of this election. We're going to broaden that approach because I believe that if you travel the state and you talk to as many people as possible, we're not going to isolate people down to just Democrats or just, look, we're going to argue a message of economic populism. We're going to stay unapologetically progressive, but we're going to try to share that message with as many people as possible. And that's the path to victory.
Amen. Okay, well, thank you so much, Marcus. How can we support you? How can we follow you? Where would you like us to go?
Yeah, look, it'd be awesome if people check out the campaign on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Velez for Texas, just VELEZFORTX on all social media platforms. And then we have a website, velezfortexas.com. You can go and learn more about us. If anybody wants more information or wants to reach out, info@velezfortexas.com. So very, very simple, but really would mean a lot if people would come check out the campaign.
Which we are doing. Great. Thank you so much, Marcus. We will see our listeners next week, and God bless Texas.
You can follow us on all socials at Mission Texas Podcast. Email us at missiontexaspodcast@gmail.com. This episode is edited by Juan Jose Flores. Our music bumper is by Adam Pickerel, and our cover art is by Tina Sohn.